All right, good morning, class. I decided to record some comments right away so that we could sort of maintain our momentum, and I'd like to finish this up so that we can move on to a different lesson idea tomorrow. So I just have this up here to remind you all what our objective was for today. And as you probably already gathered with these screencasts, you can pause them as you see fit. So if you're feeling like I'm moving too fast for you to keep up with your notes or so on and so forth, feel free to pause to your heart's content. So today we're looking at a few different aspects of, really contingent variables that help explain why Great Britain really wound up being the epicenter or start of a industrial revolution that, even though it doesn't include equally all regions of the globe, we're going to be hard pressed to find parts of the world that aren't at least dramatically impacted by this industrial revolution. And again, whether we're talking about the core or the periphery, we're looking at some dramatic transformations of the global order and how things function. And I made, we spent a lot of our time together today talking about the nature of energy and the way in which energy is configured prior to the industrial era in world history, and how it dramatically changes during that. And so hopefully you can appreciate that. And today we left off talking about how Great Britain in particular, and to a lesser degree Europe as a whole, was a rather robust, curious, inquisitive region of the world in terms of discussing key aspects of this natural philosophy. And so this really begins in a way as abstract conversations to get at the heart of the nature of the world, how different, natural functions fit together. Certain natural laws will be crafted, laws of motion that we can largely thank Sir Isaac Newton for. Of course, Galileo and folks like Copernicus play a critical role in helping us arrive at a better model of the order of the universe, or at least our solar system. Of course, back then they would have thought of our solar system as the full extent of the universe. So this abstract natural philosophy is an important precursor. But in Great Britain, it's going to find expression. It's going to become increasingly more practical. And as I close my comments today in class, one of the challenges will be finding measures and units of measure that can speak more specifically, consistently, and objectively about what these scientists are learning about the world. Again, I closed today talking about how someone just saying that something's hot is not really a useful unit of measure. That's more of an opinion, and it's a relative reference to the conditions in which one finds oneself. So as science is becoming less and less abstract, more and more concrete and applicable, it's developing a system of tools, instruments, and units that really help it really spread and take on actually a greater following. And I put here the curious case of gravity. Here you have a depiction of Sir Isaac Newton, who's sitting here pondering and contemplating this apple that has fallen from a tree and just, undoubtedly fallen to earth. And of course, this was a real source of curiosity and wonder. Why is it that this happens? And why does it happen pretty much every time an apple is separated from a tree. It falls to the ground. And so I put the curious case of gravity here because gravity was, while it was a relentless force of motion, it happened, and it happened consistently. It was incredibly difficult to describe. And so these natural philosophers, as they try to put the inexplicable into terms that can be understood, are slowly building this scientific culture and helping people think in ways that are scientific as opposed to hunchy and superstitious-y and just based on tradition. Because, of course, gravity's been happening for thousands of years, but it's also been inexplicable for thousands of years. What's going to make it different for these natural philosophers are their attempts to be able to explain it. And so theories of large bodies exerting force on smaller bodies, such as the theory of relativity, which will still be way down the way, but the notion of gravity as a force becomes really important, an important precursor to being able to then understand. Similarly, maybe a good parallel is the nature or the notion, the theory of evolution, of course, is going to be in existence well before folks like Charles Darwin come up with natural selection as a mechanism by which evolution carries itself out. So really taking these theories and trying to match them with mechanisms will be a powerful part of this. So the third aspect that's really important to Great Britain's place at the heart of this coming industrial revolution is, in some ways, these are more contingent variables, because while a lot of this natural philosophy was being shared and discussed in different parts throughout Europe and the West, what makes Great Britain different, a little different in an important way, is that the Anglican Church was one of relatively few, in fact it was very, it may well have been the only aspect of the Christian world that was alive and well throughout Europe. The Anglican Church embraced Newton's theories of gravity and mechanical laws. The Dutch Reformed Church of the Calvinist tradition, the Catholic Church, Lutheran churches, so on and so forth, they were in many ways affronted or concerned, insulted by this notion that the earth would function by mechanical, scientific laws that would be thought of as being somehow separate from God's design. And granted, there's nothing about a faith-filled perception of the order of the world that would necessarily have to conflict with a scientific view. But nonetheless, this was a new challenge to the Christian institutions of Europe, and it was the Anglican Church that did the best job in terms of science of allowing scientific vocabulary and explanations to go forth and prosper. And this is important because it allows for scientific discussions and scientific explanations to find root more deeply in everyday British society. And that's probably critical because it allows science to move from being the area of abstract, sort of disembodied conversation and discourse to actually finding it closer, more closely related to the everyday needs and everyday applications that science might actually have within British society. So this gives way to an engineering culture. Another way of thinking about this is really a problem-solving culture. And we'll see how this becomes rooted in some fairly concrete ways. So now we have engineers and entrepreneurs who are going to be the key actors in this industrialization. It's no longer the natural philosophers. Now we have the people who are, enough of this abstract natural philosophy. Let's get this party started. Let's get this science thing actually working in a way that adds benefit and value to the people of British society. So natural philosophy is turning, more away from laws and theorems to actually concrete mechanisms that, you see this mobile engine. This is, we're seeing, some laws of gas and pressure and vacuums being translated into motion that can actually accomplish a task, which will be absolutely critical to the industrial revolution that is happening in the background. So abstract disciplines, physics, mechanics, chemistry, find concrete expression in tasks related to manufacturing and transportation. And more on that just momentarily. So steam engines are going to be a really important manifestation or expression of this practical application of science. And this is interesting because, I'm sorry, I misspelled this. That should be Newcomen. He is a really early pioneer in steam engine technology, and it's interesting, going all the way back to the early 1700s, he creates a pump so that he can remove water from the bottom of coal mines. And this is interesting in a couple of different ways because it shows you that the earliest use of steam engines happens in places where coal is most abundant, because part of what makes this steam engine pump for coal mines possible, what makes it feasible, is that coal is abundant right in the immediate vicinity of this pump. And so when Newcomen invents this pump, it's not even a very efficient one, but he's able to use coal, burn coal, to pump water that allows for a greater access to coal because the bottoms of these mines are no longer filled with water and threatening that process. If we go forward several decades, then we start to see coal being used as an energy source to power engines that will drive industrial processes, such as those invented by Watt and his close sort of sponsoring, I guess, capitalist Bolton. And so taking these, through designing more efficient coal-run steam engines, now these engines can be located further removed from coal supplies because they don't require as much coal, because they're almost an order of magnitude more efficient. So they don't need as much coal. So that coal can be shipped and transported and won't be, the volume of coal needed won't be quite so great. And my closing comment here is just that all of these developments of the steam engine create positive feedback loops, in the sense that if you are able to use coal to generate energy, that energy can be used to create things like iron and eventually steel, which create more efficient iron machines, industrial engines, because the engines themselves are oftentimes made out of this iron. Similarly, they allow you to build and lay railroad track, which allows you greater access to coal supplies, which then in turn, through the beauty of steam engine transport, allow coal to be shipped to these factories where more and more things can be created. And so with that, I'll stop, and I'll look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.